disabling dark mode. Just
Good, so I can start. Yeah, so hello everyone, so my name is Filip and I'm one of the Flow core developers as well. And today I'm going to talk about how you and we can build your own Flowable Spring Boot application, basically from the ground up, something similar we do on our platform and just with our starters. But before we go into that, let's just quickly go over also what Spring Boot is. Have any of you used Spring Boot? I mean, I know Cruz, you mentioned it. Good. Have you used it with Flowable, perhaps, and build your own? So what Spring Boot allows you is, it's an easy way to create standalone production-ready applications, which you can just run basically from one executable, one jar. You can just run it with it has an embedded Tomcat, an embedded Jetty server, Undertour, or something else, and you don't need it to deploy it anywhere. You can just run it from there. It also has some starters. So in order to use up your build configurations, your dependency management, you just need usually to import like starter for the web, starter for Flowable, starter for JDBC, and so on. And it also automatically configures Spring and other third-party libraries. So you don't have to do the wiring together. So you only need to specify certain properties, and then you have a connection to your MySQL database, your Oracle database, and so on. And on top of that, it offers features such as production-ready features such as metrics, you have health checks, you have externalized configurations, and so on. Flowable and Spring Boot. So we have had, as Joram and Thijs mentioned at the beginning, support for Spring Boot since the first versions of Spring Boot, so since Spring Boot 1.0. Actually, 2 months after the first release, there was support within Flowable activity at that time. And we have tried to keep on track with the new releases of Spring Boot. So the last big one that we did was Spring Boot 2.0, which came together with Flowable 6.3.0. And at the same time, we migrated also our UI application, so the Flowable Modeler, REST application, task, admin, and so on, to be Spring Boot 2.0 based applications, that they are using what we internally have as well in there. And that was mostly of my slides, so now we are going to go into more code and show you how easy and how we can create one application. And so the way that one would start to create an application basically is we go to the famous start.spring.io, where you can pick your dependencies. So we have FlowFest. We are going to pick the web stack. We are going to use security. We're going to add the production-ready features such as health checks and so-called actuator. And we'll add DevTools so we can have some faster startup times with changes. And you see we're going to use Spring Boot 2.0, so we still have not migrated to that, but it's still going to work because there is nothing special that we need to do for it. And we are going to open our project. So the project that is here, this is just a backup in case something goes wrong, but I'm going to create a completely new empty project. It's called in downloads. Oh, I forgot to fix my SQL. So we can use a real database. So now we have our project. So this is just your normal, typical project, which has like a small application, basically, just the main class and empty application properties. And basically, the only thing it has inside, it has this, basically some starters. And let's quickly add our MySQL. So we have a MySQL database and configure that. So I have a database ready, so I have an empty database here called Flowable FlowFest. It has nothing inside, and we are going to use that.
Any chance you can zoom a bit more?
Yeah. I'll zoom into the application. these properties. So what we have in here, so this is how we can configure a different database. So we have our Spring, so through properties we configure MySQL. We realized recently that we need something changed in MySQL 8, so we need to add something like this. And we have the password, username and password, and then this is I'll show afterwards what it is. So we import the changes, and then we can run our application. I need to zoom in more.
Oh, that's fine.
So now, forgot something else. This is not going to work because I have the Flowable modeler running on that port. So I'm going to just move this to another port and rebuild, and this is now going to should work. So now it's going to boot up my bare Spring Boot application on port 881. And to show this, we can show that we have our application. Have nothing in here, so this is basically the information endpoint, which is empty right now, and you can see the application is also up. And then let's now just add a small controller, basically, which will just tell us. So this is still not a Flowable Spring Boot application, so just add a small controller, which will tell us. Greet us, basically. And we'll add the name of the user. That's logged in.
Can you zoom in a bit?
Ah. So we just add level and we get the user. Welcome to FlowFest. It's more in the middle of it. So we can now rebuild our application. We can see that now it's starting up. I'm going to copy this because this is the default security from kicking in from Spring Boot, and it created a user for us in the back. So if we try and now go to localhost 81 and we say hello, it's going to require us to log in basically. And the default user is user, and the password is the one which was created in the console. And we can say, yeah, you see here that it created the user, and now we can see these things. And the next thing, what we're going to show is, now we are going to make this application a flowable application. So the only thing which you need to do to make this application a flowable application is nothing else than adding a different starter, and that would be the Flowable Spring Boot starter. So we have different starters. So we have, if you just want to run CMN, or if you just want to run PPMN and so on, then you can pick different ones. But we're going to pick the one with all the engines. So we have the app engine, CMN, PPMN, and so on. And we're going to also to make this application a Flowable REST application. So the REST API Flowable will also be available here. So we have this. We're going to take a snapshot version, which I have built locally, and it's going to work for us. And to show one other difference that you're going to see is, if we go now to this endpoint, so let me, before I do this, to show you that it's actually a Flowable Spring Boot application, I need to expose something. So we are going to expose all the properties, all the actuator endpoints, so we can see what is actually mapped there. So updated the application. So if we go here, we can actually see that we have only one dispatcher, so we don't have anything else. And now we are going to add our Flowable application, so our Flowable starter. So it's just easiest getting this. We need to re-import this. Now I need to stop and then stop again. So now it's building, and we're going to see now the creation of the database. So now you see this Flowable creating SQL, basically creating the process engine, identity engine, liquid base kicking in for the other engines. setting everything up. And you can see here we have different servlets being booted up, so the other engines, and everything now is started. So we can check the database and refresh this here. And actually see them all our tables. So these are like the well-known flowable tables that we have here. And now let's see what happens now if we try to go here. So now it's asks for a login, and however we don't see this password here. And the reason for this is that when you have Flowable as an application, by default you are going to enable the Flowable identity service. So you will need to use that to log in into the application and do all those such things. For this reason, we are going to create a small command line runner that's going to create our, basically I have something here on the side. I'm going to go through that. So this class here, I'm going to zoom in now. What it basically does, it's usually you're going to have your LDAP connected or your custom screen, Flowable connect identity service, and so on. Once you have that, it's going to work properly. But now we're going to create, when we start the application, we're going to create some users. So we're going to create the FlowFest user, if it doesn't exist, the FlowFest actuator, FlowFest REST user, and we're going to create certain privileges. So privileges is the way that how we, from Flowable open source, we map into the Spring security granted authorities. So we are going to have the role REST authority and the role actuator authority and give that to the appropriate users. So now when we run again, so we can now build the project again, and it's going to stop and then restart again. So now it's much faster starting up because the database, the tables are already there. And now we can go to here and we can log in now with our FlowFest user and our test password. So now logged in. And in here we see now that we have much more information. So we have the content REST API, we have the forum, we have here the BPMN, we have CMMN, and so on. So basically all the APIs are now exposed as part of your application. So now this application is on the same level as the Flowable REST application that we have. Now let's and to show this also, if we go to the hello, now we see it's FlowFest, the FlowFest user. Something else that user really frequently need is, so you usually are not satisfied with the default configuration from Spring for how it configures the security and so on. So for that, we are going to create our own custom security. I also have this on the side, so time constraints. So what this is going to do is basically we are going to authorize all the requests. So the info and the health endpoint will be allowed to all users. Then we have this all other actuator endpoints will be allowed to users with this actuator role. So it will be the FlowFest actuator user. And then we have some end managers. So basically all APIs of Flowable are mapped to process API, CMMN API, DMN API, and so on. So people with the REST role can access that, and then everything else is accessible to our users. We're going to disable the form login. And now, so to make something easier, we're going to disable CSRF and enable HTTP basics. And when we restart, so now this is created this, and we see now we're still with the FlowFest user logged in. But if we try to go here, it says it's not allowed, because this user doesn't have this privileges. And everything, all of this information are fed from the Flowable database, so from the Flowable IDM engine. On top of that, if you don't, in case you don't want to use the Flowable identity service as a user detail store, you can easily define your own beans, basically. So you can define your own user detail service with your own custom users, basically custom actuator, custom REST, and then you can. So now this is an in-memory user service, but it can be anything. So it can be some LDAP, it can be open ID and so on. So start it, and now to show this, I'm going to show this to here. So if we log in with the FlowFest user, which we saw before, it says it will not exist. So it's unauthorized. But if you log in with the custom user that we created, it's going to. It should work. I know why. I know why. Oh, no, I don't know.
Restart?
You restart because you didn't see a restart.
Yeah, it's changed. But
And
let's stop and then start again.
Yeah.
The dev tools are what allows you to have these fast starts, but sometimes they don't work properly. Yeah, let's see.
See, now it's fine.
Yeah.
Now it's going to work. No. I don't know, it needs to be custom REST, right?
It's custom.
Actually,
No, but it's. Yeah, but also. Both should work. I'm trying the. Something's missing here. Let me check. I know where. Right now I remember. So what I forgot to add is the problem is this. So you see this thing that I added here? So this key ID, basically in Spring Security 5, by default, you have this Spring delegating password encoder. So which means that when you have that password encoder and then if you use this, so this was like an identifier for the encoder, how it needs to, what it needs to use to check if the password matches. So now, because by default, due to backwards compatibility, we have the no-op password encoder in Flowable open source. In order to change this, we can change this now to something else, password encoder. We can change this to the default Spring Security 5 delegator. So this is the encoder, this is the Spring delegating one. And if we now rebuild, it's going to work. But then our own from the database are not going to work.
So we put some money on it.
That's bad.
So now if you go here and then we try our custom REST user, now it's working. But now our own is not going to work. So I'm going to disable this for now. So because I already have the users in here. So and now let's add a small process. So I have created a small process which looks like this. So I have the Flowable modeler running. Modeler. And here I have a small vacation request service, which basically has a signal start event, and then has two service tasks. So one service task which basically uses a delegate expression, which has this vacation request processor, and then it has a confirmation service which just compares with the employee name and the number of days. and this is located here. This is our, and to make, in order to deploy a process automatically out of your deployment switch, out of your application, by default, if all BPM and XML files or BPM and 20 XML which are located into your processes folder are going to get picked up by the Flowable auto configuration, and they're going to be deployed when you start the application. For this, I need to rebuild the entire project. Rebuild the project. Because IntelliJ doesn't pick up the files automatically. And we start the application. Started it up, and then if we now go to the REST API, so this would be, like, let's say, the process definition, we can query. So this is the exact same APIs as you have in the Flowable REST application. So you can use everything from there. And if you query that API with the user, with the Flow REST user,
You would need to use your internal users again, right?
yeah, but this is into FlowFest. It's not Flowable, it's FlowFest test user.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we have here now, this is the standard API. But sometimes you also want to have your own controllers that are using the Flowable services. So you can quickly build a definitions controller that is going to be a REST controller. It's going to use the Flowable,
Let me make it bigger.
yes, the Flowable repository service. And we are just going to display the latest, the keys of the latest definition, so nothing, latest definitions which are deployed. And for that, it's just, yeah, so we can do much more things here, but now we're just going to get the latest versions, we're going to get the list. Basically we have this, and now, so this can be a different way that you can just build your own controllers for your own UI in a different way. It's now booted up, and if we go to our Postman again, we have here the latest definitions, and we see that the vacation request is there. But we also got from Flowable is, so I forgot to mention, is an endpoint, an actuator endpoint, which allows you to see the state of the engine. Like you can see how many tasks were completed today. You see all the deployed process definitions with their versions and their count and so on, so you see a bunch of information. This is like the production ready feature which you could use to see this information. And now we are going to make our vacation request work, we are going to integrate this with Spring Cloud function. So we are going to have a consumer which listens to certain events, and in this case the vacation request, and then it's going to trigger this vacation request and start the vacation request. But before we do that, we need to create so we need to add some dependencies, and this is as easy as I need to copy now. I mean, it's still in release candidate, so I added this because I don't need to type all of this by hand. So we have this here. Then we just need to add these dependencies, our own dependencies. So this can be maybe even a full-fledged integration that's will work out of the box for any signal and so on, but for our use case now we're going to tie it with this particular process that we have deployed. We need to include this. then we have this vacation request input and process. Just drop that here. So the vacation request input is just the normal JSON. It just does nothing special than just has the employee name, number of days, vacation motivation, which are input parameters for the process, and our this was the vacation request process, and then I need the vacation request consumer. So this would be the vacation request. This would be the consumer from Flowable. From Spring Cloud. Basically, it's just a normal Java util function, so a normal Java util consumer. And what it's going to do basically is it has the runtime service in there. It's going to react on the vacation request input, so it has the employee name, number of days, and then it's going to signal an event will it just I called the start process instance by mistake. Yeah, it's a start vacation request. And we saw in the process, that we have, so here we have the process vacation. So we have the delegate execution, which is the vacation request processor, this is basically a normal Spring Bean to result to a Spring Boot, and this bean needs to implement the Java delegate. For that, we have this vacation request processor, which implements the Flowable Java delegate. And the only thing it's going to do is it's going to get the employee name and all the information from the execution. And it's going to log this into the console. And we also saw that we had a confirmation service. So if we try to run this service now, it's not going to work because the confirmation service isn't present. So we need a service, which is the confirmation service, and this service will only do also. Also, this will only log. It's confirmed. This will be good. So this is really simple, but in normal use cases, it will be something completely different. So it's much more involved than this simple. Here passing the employee name and the number of days. So we have this, and now if we restart the application, so we've now restarted the application. It's going to start up, and we can do a post. So posting a vacation request is as simple as, so we didn't, if you didn't know this, so we didn't expose this anywhere. So the only thing that we did is we created this vacation request consumer and made it a component. And when using Spring Cloud function, this component is then automatically mapped as a REST endpoint because we are using the Spring Cloud Starter function web. However, if you, for example, use Kafka or if you use RabbitMQ implementation for Spring Cloud function, these would be exposed as a message queue, for example. And then if we just post this, we see it consumed, it returned 200 OK, and then we see that our process was started, so we have the application request processor, and then it finished. And then if we check, for example, our our Flowable endpoint, we can see now that we have a complete, let it completed, but here we don't expose. We don't expose the completed process instances. So
completed process instance count. Vacation request version 1 a bit below.
Yes.
Line 14. Yeah.
Line 14. Yes. So here you have the running one, and here you have the completed ones. Yeah. So you can basically like this. You have now a complete, let's say, a function where you can use Flowable. Another use case would be also you can also have daemon execution. So I have a service that will just I have another example with daemon. So it doesn't have to be the process engine, it can be anything. So we have this risk process, risk rating process, which just, it's quite simple. It checks the age and category on that review, and then it decides something, some output. And I have also the implementation for that. I have this risk input, this risk calculator. So this is a bit different because this one is not acting on things. This is it gets an input and then it gives an output. So what the risk calculator does is basically it So what the risk calculator basically does, the risk calculator is a normal function, Java util function, and then it gets the input, and internally, so now this will use the daemon rule service, will provide the variables which are known here, and then it will execute for a single result. And then once it's executed, we have this result map, and then we're going to map this into our output, basically. So this will be like the risk outputs, the result API, and the risk input is our request API. And if we restart it now,
You need the daemon resource.
Just to show that how it will fail.
That's good.
So if you now try to, then it's really actually, if you try to run it, and you do calculate risk, it's age, and you see it's still risk. The name of the component is how it's mapped. See if we get now an internal error. Once, if we map this then properly, you can also get a 404, for example, and things like that. If you add the daemon, which is this one, you see we don't only drop this in the daemon folder, and then if we restart our application, yes, unfortunately, IntelliJ doesn't see the file, and the automatic deployment doesn't work properly. Even normal deployment won't work properly. I don't know why. Something they need to work on. So now it starts up, and now if we close this, we can see now that it was accepted. If we make it 17, or if it was less than 17, then it's declined because the applicant is too young. And then if we add the parameters, it's going to one other thing. So in a lot of cases, in a lot of cases, you would need to customize. So this is we are using the default configurations from the starters from FlowFest. So you can configure a lot of things through properties. So you can see under Flowable there are a lot of properties. So you can configure the location of your automatic files, so where they picked up, whether they should be deployed or not. So you can disable this. And you can configure the executor, the CMN, BPMN, we have different executors. However, not everything you can do with properties. There are still some things which are not done through properties. And one of the things, for example, if you noticed, you probably didn't, but I know that it's there, it's this validate, we have this validation of V5 entities. But let's say when you're starting a new application, you don't really need this, because if you start from scratch with the newest architectures, you don't need this validation. So one way to disable it, because it is not exposed as a property, is through this property. So if you define a bean which takes the Spring process engine configuration. Bigger. So this engine, so if you have a bean of this engine configuration, and then you define which configuration you want to modify, what it basically is going to do when the configuration is started, the defaults from Flowable are going to get applied, and then you can apply extra, your own stuff on top of it. And then you can do as easy, so for example, if we disable the validation of the Flowable V5 entities, you can do much more things. So you have access to everything, like to the whole configuration. So you can do a lot of things. You can set everything in here. So basically everything. So it's like you can do whatever you want. And now if you restart, you'll see. So if we rebuild now, we're going to see now that this validation did not happen. There is no validation now happening. You search for validate, there is only once. That's the old one, yeah. So now there should be not. Just in case. I don't know. I think we heard it twice.
I think so.
See, now there is no validation happening. There is nothing here. Good. So I think that's more or less. So we are going to finish it up. Finish with my slides. So yeah, this is the demo, and yeah, basically, so this is what we did. We added custom REST endpoints, we added custom security configuration, custom users. We used custom beans within our own applications. Then we configured the engine through the engine configurers. We showed how you can use Spring Cloud function and Flowable driving your processes in the back. We didn't show how to test, but it will be in the examples. And some future work in this direction, so with how we can improve with Spring Boot. What I want to do is, so next would be to add some, to make sure that everything works fine with Spring Boot 2.1. I don't think that there will be any problems. This will also open us the doors towards JDK 11. So I think that Spring was the last dependency that was not JDK 11 compatible. So we can now go and have our QA system running with JDK 11. And then just do more experiments, maybe even provide some better integration like we have for Apache Camel, that we have also for Spring Cloud Function, for example. And the metrics that I showed, maybe we can expose them also to micrometers, so they can then be fed into JMX or to other systems as micrometers support. And the source code will be available here. It's not yet available, but I'm going to commit this this evening or tomorrow. It will be also within this slide. So the location where you can find it. Thank you. That was it from me. And there are some more questions.
Any questions for now? Or we're going to have well, go on.
You don't have to answer this right now, but one of the issues I noticed was like if you had a custom IPADS mapper, like it wasn't working because the Spring Dev Tools has its own class loader and that breaks. Like, I don't know if that's something you tried out.
You haven't tried it, but you were having the class cast exception and things like
No, I
this?
just couldn't find the class because Spring, the dev tools, has its own class loader and I couldn't find this.
Yeah, with this we've seen other problems with the DevTools that we need to look into that a bit more.
Yeah,
So
and there's a workaround for you to disable the thing, but I just
you need to disable the DevTools.
DevTools, yeah, there's a way to provide exceptions in the class.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, we know that sometimes not everything is nice with the DevTools. We've seen this problem that's, for example, that's for local development. I don't know how it will be for others, but locally, like when we have the Flowable open source, for example, it can happen that with my bodies, with entity implementations, that it can load them and stuff like that. But this happens, when we run from IntelliJ.
Yes, specifically.
Exactly. When running IntelliJ within our code base, when we run from outside, like from here, we haven't seen those problems. So yeah, I think we need to investigate more. Maybe if there is something that we can do, or maybe we're not deregistering something properly. But yeah, we need to look into it. Thanks.
Any other immediate questions? Oh, so what we've got now, we've got another half-hour break. And after that, we've got Tess is going to talk about some of the work we've been doing on personalization of some of the stuff that's coming along. So that's going to be very interesting for everyone, I think. And then, Tess is going to talk about some of the other stuff that's coming on. So in half an hour to just get your energy back up and get your brains in gear again, ready for Urim and turbo speed and Thank you.